Have you ever really stopped to think about your history textbook? I mean, we treat them like they're just collections of facts, right? But there's so much more. They're actually stories, carefully put together, each with its own angle. So today, let's pull back the curtain and deconstruct the story behind the stories in one really fascinating history textbook.
Let's start with a number. Actually, two numbers. In the 14th century, the population of Europe just plummeted from 73 million people down to 45 million. That's a staggering drop caused by famine and the Black Death. Now, any history book will tell you that. But what if a book's real mission isn't just to state that fact, but to explain how a disaster of that scale could even happen?
And that question, right there, is the heart of this whole explainer. We're going to dive into one specific history textbook to see how it answers these questions. Because it's not just about what happened, it's about how we know it happened, how that story gets told, and, why any of it matters in the first place.
To really get what this textbook is trying to do, we're going to go straight to the source, its own foreword. This is where it lays out its entire philosophy. It's got a mission, and that mission is to change how we learn about the past.
So right away, the book basically throws down a gauntlet. It sets up this conflict between the old way, just, memorizing kings and dates, what it calls rote learning, and its goal. A system that's more about the student, that encourages you to actually think about how you're learning. It's a call to action, really. It wants us to stop being passive sponges for facts and start being active participants in history. And here it is, the promise stated right there in black and white. This book isn't just here to celebrate the shiny, happy stories of progress. Nope. It's about digging into the darker histories, the complicated, sometimes messy truths that those simple, triumphant stories usually leave out. Let's see how it actually does that. Okay, so our first case study takes us way back to ancient Mesopotamia. We all have that mental image, right? Grand cities, amazing artifacts. But this book immediately says, hold on. Look past the pretty objects and see the society that had to exist to create them. So take this piece, the work ahead. It's a world-famous sculpture. It's gorgeous, it's ancient, and get this, it's made from marble that had to be imported. An old school textbook might just stop right there, but this one uses it as a clue, a starting point to ask, what kind of society does it take to pull something like this off? And the key concept it uses to unlock this is the division of labor, the engine that makes all cities run. I mean, think about your phone. One person didn't just find some sand and metal and build it from scratch, right? You needed miners, engineers, programmers, designers, all working in this huge coordinated system. The textbook is saying that's the exact same social machinery we need to see at work in ancient Mesopotamia. And this is the point. The work ahead isn't just one artist's masterpiece, it's the final piece of this huge invisible network. It took organized trips to foreign lands for the stone, specialized tool makers for the carving tools, of course the master carvers themselves, and then a central power, like a temple, to organize the whole shebang. The book forces us to see the entire system, not just the sculpture. All right, let's jump forward in time for our next example and see how this approach builds a more complicated picture. We're looking at a period a lot of us think we know, the Dark Ages. But right off the bat, the textbook challenges that very name. So what this shows us is that the Dark Ages wasn't some objective description. It was basically a piece of branding, a powerful marketing slogan created by Renaissance humanists centuries later. Why? To make their own time seem way more enlightened by comparison. The textbook is showing us that even the words we use to describe history have a history of their own. So instead of just some vague darkness, the book reveals this cascade of disasters, a perfect storm. First, the climate gets colder and harvests fail. Then, massive famines hit. This weakens the entire population just as the Black Death shows up, carried on trade ships. It wasn't just one bad thing. It was a fragile system completely falling apart. And here, we're back to the shocking human cost we started with. But this crisis did more than just kill millions. It completely changed society. All of a sudden, there's a severe labor shortage. The old feudal system starts to crack under the pressure, leading to huge social unrest and eventually real change.
The so-called darkness was actually a period of intense and violent transformation. Okay, for our last case study, the book takes on the idea of what it even means to be modern. Is there only one way to get there? A path that always starts in Europe? The book's answer is a very firm no. The textbook is explicitly challenging a Eurocentric view of the world here. It's arguing against this old idea that history is just a story of Britain industrializing and everyone else playing catch-up. Instead, it says we need to look at how different nations forge their own unique paths. Let's look at Meiji Japan. It wasn't a simple case of let's copy the West. The textbook reveals this intense debate happening inside the country. You had people like Fukazawa Yukichi who argued Japan needed to totally westernize, to, in his words, expel Asia. But then you had others like Miyake Setsure, who argued that Japan should modernize on its own terms and contribute its own unique gifts to the world. China's journey was different yet again. For them, it wasn't some intellectual debate about which model to follow. It was a desperate struggle to survive, driven by the absolute terror of being colonized, just like they saw happening to their neighbors. Those negative examples became this incredibly powerful fuel for change. And nothing captures this fear more than this phrase. In the 1890s, to Poland us literally became a verb in China. It meant to be carved up and destroyed by foreign powers. That one phrase tells you everything you need to know. For China, the path to modernity wasn't just an option. It was a desperate existential fight. So after showing us how it tells its stories, by revealing hidden systems, deconstructing labels, and showing us that there are many different paths, the textbook leaves us with the biggest question of all. You see, it becomes totally clear that the book's real goal isn't just to teach us facts about the past. It's to teach us how to think like a historian, to ask the important questions. Where is this information from? What are the sources? What were the debates? How do we actually know what we think we know? And in the end, it all comes down to this. The book closes by quoting the famous historian Mark Bloch, who was asked this very question by his son. By showing us the story behind the stories, this textbook doesn't just give us the answers. It empowers us, the readers, to ask the most important question for ourselves. What is the use of history? Why does any of this matter?